I thank Dr. I sincerely thank Dr. Vipin Sharma sir for giving me this opportunity to talk about the updates, the recent edition of Sabistal, that is the 21st edition, uh, in topics such as stomach, esophagus, and liver. Let's start with the updates. Uh, First, I am about to talk about the updates in the carcinoma stomach, which is a very important topic both for exams as well as NEET, and there are many updates that has been given in the 21st edition. First, let's talk about the updates in the epidemiology. So, what are the updates? In the epidemiology section, it is been updated that it is a disease of older individuals, with the peak incidence in the seventh decade of life. Okay, the peak incidence of carcinoma stomach is seventh decade of life. Also, higher geographic latitudes are associated with higher gastric cancer. So, as the latitude increases, the risk of gastric cancer also increases. Among the developed countries, Japan and Korea are the highest rates of disease. So we all know that the country with the most common cancer is Japan. Gastric cancer is very much common in Japan. Therefore, screening program has been started in Japan in the 1970s. Because of the screening program, the mortality has been improved significantly in Japan. So, the risk factors of carcinoma stomach. This is the tabular column, which is from the 20th edition of Sabiston, and this is from the 21st edition of Sabiston. And a very important point has been updated, that is obesity. Obesity has been updated. Obesity, the term obesity has been added in the 21st edition. Also, in the medical section, hereditary predisposition and prior abdominal irradiation. Hereditary predisposition and prior abdominal irradiation has been added in the 21st edition. So kindly remember, from the 21st edition, obesity is an important risk factor for carcinoma stomach. Also, hereditary predisposition and prior abdominal irradiation and also has been updated. Next, so let's talk about in detail about the risk factors. In H. pylori, we all know that H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori is an important causative factor for carcinoma stomach. And in the Helicobacter pylori section, it has been said that in epidemiological studies, the seropositivity has been associated with an approximately six-fold increased risk of developing gastric cancer. So, a patient with H. pylori seropositivity, the risk of gastric cancer is about six-fold increased compared to normal population. This point has been updated from page 1219. So next, the hereditary risk factors. As we all know, the hereditary predisposition. So what are the hereditary predispositions? So the most commonly we all know that there is a term called as hereditary diffuse gastric cancer. It arises because of the genetic mutation from E-cadherin, that is the cell adhesion molecule E-cadherin, and the lifetime incidence is about 60 to 70% risk of developing gastric cancer. In previous edition, it has been said as 80%, and in newer edition, the previous edition, it has been said as 80%. In this edition, it is reduced to 60 to 70%. Okay. So, and very important point has been updated in the newer edition. So, when a prophylactic total gastrectomy should be done for a patient with hereditary diffuse cancer, the age is prior to 30 years of age. In previous edition, it was simply given as prophylactic total gastrectomy should be considered for patients with at risk for developing lobular breast cancer. Okay, so the screening for lobular breast cancer should also
Sir, we can't
begin.
see the screen. Sir, we can't
No?
see the screen. We can't see the screen, your screen.
Okay, okay, okay.
Sir, we also repeat the point of prophylactic
Okay.
cancer.
Of developing CS stomach is around 60 to 70%. In previous edition, it was given as 80%. And in current edition, the 21st edition, it has been changed to 60 to 70%. Next, when a patient should be considered for prophylactic total gastrectomy with diffuse gastric cancer, the age is prior to 30 years of age. In previous edition, the age has not been mentioned. Okay. Next, patients with hereditary diffuse gastric cancer are also at risk of developing lobular breast cancer. Very, very important, lobular breast cancer. And the screening for lobular breast cancer should also begin by 30 years of age. If the patient on screening is found to have lobular breast cancer, we should consider for bilateral prophylactic mastectomy. Also remember, the patients, if diagnosed with lobular breast cancer, he should go for prophylactic risk reducing bilateral mastectomy. Also, two newer autosomal dominant disorders have been identified at risk for developing gastric cancer. That is the proximal polyposis of the stomach and the familial intestinal gastric cancer. Proximal polyposis of stomach and familial intestinal gastric cancer are also at risk for developing carcinoma stomach. The genetic causes have yet to be identified. So next we move on to the other risk factor, which is the polyp. Okay, we know that there are various types of polyps, and one such polyp is adenomatous polyps. So what is the risk factor? Patients with adenomatous polyps are at risk for developing about 30%. The risk for development of carcinoma stomach is about 30% and increases with increasing size of the polyp. Next is the hyperplastic polyps, which is associated with H. pylori infection. And the associated risk is about 2%. And the associated risk is 2%. Next is the Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. We all know that Peutz-Jeghers syndrome is associated with gastric polyps. The risk for developing CS stomach is 2 to 3%. 2 to 3%. So next is the gastric polyp. Gastric polyps is a common incidental finding during upper GI endoscopy, and the incident is about 5%. Of the incidence is 5%, and they are usually asymptomatic. Okay, usually asymptomatic. The malignancy risk and subsequent management largely depend upon the histology of the polyp. So, if a patient with an isolated polyp greater than 1 centimeter in size, if present, should have a complete polypectomy. If the size of the polyp is more than 1 centimeter, we should undergo complete polypectomy. Those with multiple polyps, the largest should be removed endoscopically if possible, and the remaining polyp should be biopsied. This is a very important point. This has been updated. Patient with an isolated polyp, single polyp more than 1 centimeter, it should be completely removed. For multiple polyps, the largest polyp alone should be removed endoscopically, and the remaining polyp should be biopsied. Also, the biopsy of the normal mucosa should be considered to rule out underlying dysplasia and the H. pylori infection. Okay. So, as we all know, the risk factor recently prior abdominal irradiation has been updated, and what irradiation is causes CS stomach, that is irradiation for testicular cancer and Hodgkin's lymphoma. Irradiation for testicular cancer and Hodgkin's lymphoma increases risk of gastric cancer. So next we move on to the classification of the carcinoma stomach. We all know that the most common classification used is the Borman's classification. In the previous edition, the Borman classification was divided into 5 types. In the previous edition, the Borman classification divides gastric carcinoma into 5 types. But in the latest edition, this system divides gastric carcinoma into 4 types. Remember, it is 4 types. So type 1 polypoid, type 2 fungating, type 3 ulcerating, and type 4 diffusely infiltrating, known as the Linitis plastica. The previous edition, Linitis plastica was known as 5th type. Okay. The previous edition, Linitis plastica was fifth type. In the recent edition, Linitis plastica is type 4, diffusely infiltrating growth. Okay. Also, a very important point has been updated in the newer edition. That is the Paris classification. That is a new classification known as the Paris classification. Is updated in the 21st edition. Okay. So this is the Paris classification, that is for early gastric cancer. It is of 3 types: type 1, type 2, type 3. The type 3 is further subdivided into type 2A, type 2B, and type 2C. So type 1 lesions is the protruder or the pedunculated. Type 2 lesions are non-polypoid. Type 1 is polypoid, type 2 is non-polypoid. Type 2A is slightly elevated, type 2B is flat, type 3 is slightly depressed, and type 3 is excavated. This is the Paris classification for early gastric cancer. Next, we move on to the signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms. This has been newly added and names have been given for the nodes. So in the newer edition, the supraclavicular nodes, as we all know, that's known as the metastasis to supraclavicular nodes is known as Virchow's nodes. Metastasis to axillary nodes is Irish nodes. The periumbilical nodes is known as Sister Mary Joseph nodes. The drop metastasis to ovary is known as Krukenberg.
Not audible, sir.
No audio, sir.
Wait for a while, I'm calling them.
And genetic disorders. Okay, the answer is okay. So I will repeat from the lymph node, name of the lymph nodes. Okay, sorry for the interruption. The signs and symptoms section, the recent edition, the metastasis to appropriate areas have been named. For supraclavicular nodes, it is named as Virchow nodes. For the axillary nodes, it is named as Irish nodes. For the periumbilical nodes, it is been named as Sister Mary Joseph nodes. For the drop metastasis to ovary, it is named as Krukenberg. For rectal deposits, it is known as Blumer-Shelf. Okay. The minimum number of lymph nodes that should be examined for staging of carcinoma stomach is 16. The minimum number of nodes that should be examined for carcinoma stomach is 16. Okay. For screening for carcinoma stomach should be done in all of the following conditions except, okay, gastric polyp, hereditary diffuse cancer, pernicious anemia, and genetic disorders. Okay. As Mr. Rohit has mentioned, it is correct. The answer is B, hereditary diffuse gastric cancer. Okay. So recently there is a new screening has been updated in the latest edition. So because of the high incidence of CS stomach in Japan, screening program has been usually done in Japan, Korea, and Chile. What are the two important modalities that is used for screening? That is the upper J endoscopy and the barium radiography. So these two are the modalities used for screening: UGA-scopy and barium radiography. UGA-scopy has better sensitivity compared to barium radiography. So the optimal screening modality and interval have not been universally established and varies by region. So selective screening of patients with the specific high risk factors should be considered in patients with gastric polyp or adenomas, pernicious anemia, and certain genetic disorders like Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. So this is the answer for the question. Screening should not be include patients with hereditary diffuse gastric cancer, as these tumors often arise beneath an intact mucosa and would be missed by routine screening. Therefore, the answer is B, hereditary diffuse gastric cancer. Okay. So next we move on to the staging of CS stomach. The staging is the TNM staging. In TNM staging, there is only one change. The change is in TIS, that is in situ. The new point has been added, that is the high grade dysplasia. Okay, TIS, there is a new point has been added, that is high grade dysplasia. This is the newer point that has been added, and rest all is same in staging. And this has been changed and has been submitted for modifications. Okay. Next, we move on to the workup of steamy stomach. We all know that the basic workup is the upper GI endoscopy, CT or the MRI abdomen, and the endoscopic ultrasound and PET CT scan. These are the tests that is usually been done. And in the section of endoscopic ultrasound, following things have been updated. So, as a part of NCCN guidelines, endoscopic ultrasound has been recommended for staging workup of CS stomach, especially if there is no evidence of metastatic disease. Endoscopic ultrasound is very important if in a patient without evidence of metastatic disease. Okay, it provides the accurate evaluation. Most accurate evaluation of the depth of the tumor invasion, assessment of perigastric lymph node involvement, and also sometimes identify the presence of ascites and involvement of surrounding organs. The presence of ascites and involvement of surrounding organs can also be identified using endoscopic ultrasound. Okay. Next, nodes can also be evaluated using endoscopic ultrasound, and we can also do FNAC under endoscopic ultrasound guidance. Okay, FNAC can also be performed if there is ascites, and we can evaluate the presence of peritoneal spread. So the overall accuracy of endoscopic ultrasound depends upon the operator, and it ranges from 57 to 88% for T stage and 30 to 90% for nodal stage. Okay, for T
Not audible, sir.
Okay. So the overall accuracy of endoscopic ultrasound is operator dependent, ranges from 57 to 88% for T stage and 30 to 90% for N stage. Okay, and a recent study has been done by Cochrane, which says that the sensitivity and specificity for discriminating T1 and T2 versus T3 and T4 diseases were 86 and 90% respectively. The sensitivity and specificity for nodal involvement in T1 and T2 was 83%, and for T3 and T4 disease it was 67%. Okay. Next, we move on to the newer word term, that is, we all know that ERAS, this is the enhanced recovery after surgery. This has been newly introduced, especially in anesthesia. So there has been certain specific recommendations given for surgery for carcinoma stomach. And what are those recommendations? That is, no routine use of nasogastric or nasojejunal decompression, and it has been advised to avoid perianastomotic drains, and whenever possible we should use minimally invasive approaches. Okay, no routine use of NG tube, and avoid perianastomotic drains and use minimally invasive approaches. Okay, also there is a weak recommendation which is being made by offering oral diet to patients undergoing total gastrectomy, especially in post-operative day 1. Okay, especially in post-operative day 1. It has been advised to start oral diet in the, usually we keep the patient NPO for 2 days and then we start slowly, and in the newer guidelines, it has been advised to start oral diet in post-operative day 1. Okay. Also, what are the complications? Okay. The ERAS protocols resulted in similar rates of complications in the perioperative mortality and reoperations. The only drawback is readmission. The number of readmission was nearly tripled in ERAS group. The readmission rate was nearly tripled in the ERAS group compared to other group. Okay. So next we move on to the treatment of carcinoma stomach. We all know that the endoscopic submucosal resection is being done for early gastric cancer. So what are the indications for endoscopic submucosal resection? A new tabular column has been given in the latest edition. That is the intestine type of adenocarcinoma. The tumor confined to the mucosa, absence of lymphovascular invasion, non-ulcerated tumor, and tumors that are less than 2 centimeter in size. These are the indications for endoscopic submucosal resection. Endoscopic resection in patients with gastric adenocarcinoma. Okay. Next, there is no change in surgical management and the adjuvant and the neoadjuvant chemotherapy. A new term called as immunotherapy. Immunotherapy has been updated in the latest edition. So immunotherapy is a potential adjunctive therapy because 40% of the gastric tumors have upregulated programmed death ligand in their genetic. So 40% of the gastric tumors have upregulated programmed death ligand. They express this gene. Therefore, nivolumab and pembrolizumab, nivolumab and pembrolizumab
Sir, there is an audio issue.
Just a while, just a while.
After surgery. Okay, the overall 5-year survival is approximately 30% after surgery. In the previous edition, it was given as 25%, and now it has been updated to 30%. Also, patients who undergo a potentially curative resection, overall 5-year survival rates range from 25 to 75%. And in the 20th edition, it was given as 24 to 57%. And next, patients with distant disease, the long-term survival is only 5%. Distant metastatic disease, the long-term survival is only 5%. Okay. Next is the recurrence rate. The recurrence rates after gastrectomy are high, which ranges from 30 to 90%, depending upon the series of study. Okay. It ranges from 30 to 90%. Most of the recurrences occur within the first 2 years. In previous edition, it was given as 3 years. In the latest edition, this has been updated to 2 years. Okay. So what is the predominant site of systemic recurrence? They are the liver and peritoneum. The predominant site of recurrence is liver and peritoneum. Remember, the site of recurrence is liver and peritoneum. Okay. Next, we move on to the next topic, that is the gastrointestinal lymphoma. these are the updates in the CA stomach. Next is the gastrointestinal lymphoma. We all know that stomach is the most common site of GA lymphoma. However, the primary gastric lymphoma is a very uncommon one. Of all the gastric malignancies, the rate is about 15%. Okay, of the total carcinoma in the stomach, GA lymphoma is about 15%. Okay, and there is a new tabular column which has been introduced, that is the staging. This is known as the Lugano staging for GA lymphoma. So the gastrointestinal lymphoma staging is named as Lugano. Okay, stage 1 is tumor confined to the gastrointestinal tract, and it is further subdivided into E1 and E2. E1 is nothing but involvement of the mucosa with or without submucosa. E2 is involvement of muscularis propria with or without serosa. And stage 2 is tumor extension into the abdomen. It is further divided into first and second stage. So the stage 2 first part is involvement of the local nodes. Second is the involvement of the distant nodes. Stage 2E is penetration into the adjacent organs and tissues. And stage 4 is disseminated extranodal involvement or supradiaphragmatic nodal involvement. Okay, this is the Lugano staging. This has been newly introduced, Lugano staging. Okay. Next, this has been deleted in that this was present in the 20th edition. This is the primary staging system, that is the Ann Arbor, Rao et al. And Musharraf. This has been deleted in the newer edition. Okay. So what is the treatment for GA lymphoma? It is mostly chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy is R-CHOP. In the previous edition, it was given as just CHOP. Just CHOP was mentioned in the previous edition. In latest edition, R-CHOP. Okay, rituximab, cyclophosphamide, hydroxydonomycin or the doxorubicin, oncovin and prednisone. Okay, in the previous edition it was just given as CHOP. In the latest edition it was updated as R-CHOP. Okay, so next we move on to the MALT lymphoma, mucosa associated lymphoid tumor, that is the MALT lymphoma. Okay, and the updates were the chromosomal translocations T114 and T1118. This has been mentioned in previous edition. Okay, T114 and T1118 was mentioned in previous edition, and translocation 314 and 1418 has been updated in the newer edition, 314 and 1418. Okay, so the translocation 114, 1118 and 1418 all has been associated with increased nuclear factor kappa beta activity with resultant enhanced cell survival. Okay, in the new, this has given in the previous edition. In the latest edition, this point has been added. Translocation 314 increases FOXP1 transcription factor levels. Okay, very important point. In MALT lymphoma, translocation 314 increases FOXP1 transcription levels, which has shown to expand the marginal zone B cells. Expands the marginal zone B cells. Okay, so FOXP1 transcription is associated with translocation 314. Okay, so then is a newer prognostic index has been developed in the recent edition. It considers 3 factors. So patients with age 70 or above and stage 4 disease and elevated LDH level all associated with worst prognosis. Okay, this is a latest prognostic index added in the newer edition. Age 70 and above, stage 4 disease and elevated lactase dehydrogenase levels all associated with worst prognosis. Next we move on to the gastrointestinal stromal tumors, that is the GIST. We all know that GIST expresses c-KIT. c-KIT is a tyrosine kinase receptor and is expressed in about 95% of GIST. Okay, this was given in the previous edition, and in the latest edition a new point has been added, that is GIST that lack a KIT mutation will have mutation in platelet derived growth factor alpha. This is a very important point. Okay, in GIST without c-KIT mutation will have a mutation in the PDGFRA. Okay. So what are the two primary prognostic factor, that is the tumor size and mitotic rate? This has been updated in the latest edition. Tumor size and mitotic rate are the very important prognostic factors for gastric GIST. Okay. Remember, platelet derived growth factor alpha. Next, we move on to the neuroendocrine tumors, that is the gastric neuroendocrine tumor. So, the diagnosis, this has been updated. The diagnosis of gastric NET is established by using esophagogastroduodenoscopy and biopsy of the lesion. Okay. Also, endoscopic ultrasound plays an important role in identifying the depth of invasion. Okay. Also, we can use CT or MRI to evaluate for the metastatic disease. And the biomarker for gastric NET is the chromogranin A. Okay, remember, chromogranin A levels are often elevated in gastric neuroendocrine tumors, and this has been used as a biomarker. Okay. Next, these are the gastric carcinoid types, the neuroendocrine tumors. This is a new tabular column that has been added in the 21st edition. This classified into three types: type 1, type 2,